Okay, welcome everybody. That's John King. Good morning, John King.
Good morning, Peter Christian.
What's going on, buddy?
A lot, actually.
Go.
Not as much as we have going on tomorrow. Tomorrow we have 3 Bobs. Count them, 3 Bobs.
Exactly.
Coming in the studio, so that should be fun.
And since the football coach is going to be on the phone, he won't be able to come in. He'll be on the phone. I'm practicing on my Grizzly Fight song.
Up with Montana.
Yes, so we're going to teach him on the air.
You can also teach me because I know only those first 2 lines.
Whew. Wow. How long shall I suffer with you? Okay, so Dave's already on the line, right?
Yeah, Dave's on the line.
Well, Dave, good morning. You're jumping the gun, buddy. What's up?
Well, I'm wondering how you're faring with this dispute between Dish and Fox News. I know you go to bed in the afternoon, so you don't get up till 2 or some darn thing. In the morning, I mean.
Yeah.
So you probably don't miss them as much as I do, but I could swear 50% of my viewing on TV was Fox News or Fox Business.
Sure.
You know? And I suspect that even if I go to DirecTV, the same thing's going to happen there. They're going to raise the rent on Fox to the point where Fox won't pay it. And we get this rogue regime in D.C., and it wouldn't surprise me in the least if they'd put the FCC up to putting the arm on Dish to keep Fox off the airwaves. They're antagonistic, after all, to Obama and company.
Well, here's what I found that was very interesting. That might kind of tweak your theory just a little bit, because my wife, who also loves Fox News, she loves O'Reilly, all that good stuff, and missing it like crazy. So she'll tune in to channel 205, which is normally the Fox News, and what do you suppose is on in its place? Glenn Beck and the Blaze. And I'm thinking, holy smoke, Glenn Beck and the Blaze make Fox News look downright democratic. I mean, the way they come down on the administration and all the end. Glenn Beck, I've always called him the Chicken Little of the airwaves. The sky is falling. And in case it does fall, you should buy my sponsor's product.
It's not real news, though. That's the trouble. They used to have a real news program on Beck, the Blaze. They did away with it. Then they had that other special on various things that came at the administration, among others. What do they call that? Real news.
I don't know.
For the record.
Okay.
That's old. All those are repeats now.
Yeah.
So he's nowhere near what Fox was doing.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting that they've just somehow managed to fill that slot with with Glenn Beck, and I'm going, whoa. I don't know.
Well, that's what they're thinking. Like, what's most similar to this product?
I
suppose. The next most similar product.
I don't know. But because the mindset is, and what I've heard reading the blogs and whatever, that the folks who own Dish are left-leaning and they don't like Fox, so they want to raise the rent. But if that's true, then why put the Blaze in there? Because it's anyway.
Well, that's slightly different. I think everyone bends to these federal agencies, sooner or later. And I only have 2 choices. It's either Fox or Direct. I used to have Direct, and I suspect the same thing could happen with Direct once I switch.
Well, it's all about you, Dave.
Well, Dave, there may be another option. Maybe you don't get Fox here, but on Friday, the U.S. has opened up travel to Cuba, so you could see if you can get it there.
Well, I think I put up my own satellite. Piss on them.
Not a bad idea. All right, thanks for the call, Matt.
Bye.
Appreciate it. There's an editorial comment for you. Anyway, 721-1290 is our number. Now, that's an interesting comment. I still because when you contact Fox, they say it's all Dish's fault. When you contact Dish, they say it's all Fox's fault.
So you just got to follow the finger pointing game.
Pretty much, yeah.
English ping pong match.
It's kind of like they need a mom. He took my crayons. No, you took my coloring book. Yes, and so mom says, "Okay, get together, share the crayons and the coloring book, and you'll be happy."
Not my mom. My mom said, "It's everybody's fault. Go to your rooms."
Anyway, all right. So now I understand that we have a problem with the Internal Revenue Service. Right?
That's right. Well, we have open phones going on right now at Talkback, but open phones Not really available if you call the IRS. I downloaded this. This is from the Associated Press.
All right.
Their online version. I forget. I got it written on here. It's something.
Associated Press. Watch it.
Watch it. WOCHIT. Anyway, that's the source for this little sound bite.
Interesting word,
but they're
actually.
covering the issue. The IRS is saying they're not going to be able to pick up the phone for most of the calls that come in this year.
All right. Well, let's listen in and see what you will be hearing.
The IRS is cutting taxpayer services to historically low levels, just as President Barack Obama's health law will make filing a federal tax return more complicated for millions of families. Got a question for IRS? Good luck reaching someone by phone. The tax agency says only half of the 100 million people expected to call this year will be able to reach a person. Wow. Callers who get through may have to wait on hold for 30 minutes or more to talk to a person who will only answer the simplest of questions.
Okay, can we try to decipher what the simplest of questions might be?
We're here to please you. Right?
No, the simple questions will be, how much do you make? And send us a check.
But get this, it gets a little bit worse.
Okay,
so that's one service.
All right.
That they're not going to keep anymore, or
All right.
at least not up to par. Right now, this is something I've never personally done. Have you ever called the IRS for help?
I have, yes.
Okay.
It was a really exciting afternoon.
Okay. Well, this is something. This is from the group Americans for Tax Reform. Kind of they're against taxes. Generally,
yes.
Kind of.
I have
anyway,
heard of that.
So you could count the bias in here a little bit. But here we go. In its annual report to Congress today, this is as of yesterday, the Office of the National Taxpayer Advocate outlined a series of Internal Revenue Service failures in the, quote, access to the IRS, end quote, section. The report detailed the trouble taxpayers face while reaching the right person in order to make their tax obligations. Quote, the IRS does not answer the phone at local offices and has even removed the option it once provided for taxpayers, including the elderly and disabled, to leave a message.
Wow.
Until 2013, taxpayers, including the elderly and disabled, were allowed to leave a voicemail requesting an in-person appointment. But now, elderly and disabled taxpayers are attempting to navigate the automated helpline maze, are asked to email the IRS and set up an appointment. Problem is, only about 57% of adults over 65 use the internet, compared with 87% of all adults.
So, okay, we're from the government, and we're here to help. we're going to take a little break, come right back, and continue. We have lots more. By the way, if you have already tried to contact the IRS and have run into this, give us a call. We got about 20 minutes of open phones left before our special guest is going to be on the air with us, who's, by the way, already here. Oh, I'm sorry, what's that?
I said he snuck in.
Yes, he did.
With his bat cape and everything.
So we're going to come right back with more. I could barely see him. He's got camo. We'll be right back with more in a moment. I know you want to clap your hands. Go ahead. Ow! 721-1290 is our number. That's John King. I'm Peter Christian. That's better. All right, got a little bit of rhythm there. Okay, so what else is going on? I understand we have another submission in our search to define Montana values.
Okay. An email.
Okay.
This one is from Libby. She says, or I assume it's a she, might be a he. John and Peter, I couldn't get it together yesterday to respond to the question, quote, what are Montana values? This poem reflects some of the values. One is the hand clasp. Many business commitments are sealed with a hand clasp, or used to be. That gesture reflected honesty and integrity.
All right.
Another value is true friendship, which also emanates from honesty and integrity. Hence, the smile dwells a little longer. Montana values reflect free and responsible individuals that accept the moral responsibility to help preserve all of our freedoms for future generations. I hope you can read the poem. The author is unknown to me. Thank you, Libby. So there you go.
Okay, so we by the way, Michael Moore is joining us, and as a journalist, one of the things I quizzed Steve Daines when he was talking with a bunch of other TV and radio folks. And he was talking about how, he's all pushing Montana values. And I said, I raised my hand. I said, could you please put a definition to that? What do you mean when you say, what are different from Montana values as opposed to South Dakota or Wyoming or California or whatever. What makes Montana Valleys? We had a pretty interesting little time yesterday. People trying to define that. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that,
Well,
just right off the top of your head.
I wonder if he would have said Billings values are different than Missoula values, or Whitefish values are different than Harleton
or
values.
Ekalaka values.
Because sometimes I feel like when people say, well, I have to represent Montanans, and I think, well, I think I'm one. And, the things that are coming out of your mouth, I find fairly objectionable. And I'm sure he would say the same about me. So I think that's kind of a phrase we let people get away with. And so I guess I'd say kudos to you for saying exactly what is it that you're talking about.
And the other phrase that always, every politician I've ever heard, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, uses the phrase, I'm going to help working families.
Right.
Okay. Well,
that's about 96% of us.
Isn't that mostly ubiquitous? For crying out loud, if they're not a working family, then, I'm sorry. What are you supposed to do?
I don't know. Well, technically, we're just working parents. The kids are not pulling their weight around.
Well, yeah, if the kids aren't working, by golly, a spanking is in order. So,
certainly.
Anyway.
Certainly. I was going to say, one of the things that I do find interesting about Montana, at least it seems business culture, compared to other states, even in the inner Mountain West, the kind of like casual business atmosphere around Montana.
And thank goodness.
Yeah. I like it, but it's very different than what I find in other states. You don't see a lot of people that dress business professional.
Here we are.
I don't see any of them here.
I certainly don't.
Here we are in our sweaters and jeans. Yeah. I do have my dress tennies on though.
Yeah.
I got my slick. These are Runner's Edge specials, baby.
It's funny watching the folks we send to DC when they come back. It's like it's a big question. Do I put the tie on crooked this time, or wear my cowboy boots, or get the
John,
jeans out of the closet?
When I worked at the newspaper, and reporters have a long tradition of not exactly being the most dressed up people around. But I just would tell people, dress for the situation. If you're going to be in federal court today and you're going to be interviewing Judge Malloy, that might be the good day to wear a tie. But if you're going to be walking around, cleaning up the river, you need to be dressed appropriately.
Yeah.
What was in the movie The Adjustment Bureau, when Matt Damon was running for office and he got trounced really bad and he was trying to give this comeback speech and he stops in the middle. He says, this is BS. He says, I'm talking about the scuff on my shoes. We paid a consultant $6,000 to tell me exactly the right amount of scuffing on the shoes. And how much did we pay the guy to pick our tie? We couldn't use yellow because it feigned that you were weak somehow, and there was red and blue, and so you use a red and blue or a blue and red. And so anyway,
yeah.
There's an art, I guess, to politics.
Well, and there's a lot of conventions to what we do that are based on the past that, they're kind of beside the point anymore.
You are what you are.
Really, putting on a tie is one of the more, uncomfortable things that I do as a man, and I've slimmed it down pretty much to occasions where someone has unfortunately died.
This is true. All right, which is kind of a weird deal anyway. But
weird.
If you think about it, I think women invented neckties because men invented high heels. It was just kind of revenge.
A little quid pro quo. I think that's
well, we're up against a break already. 721-1290. My goodness, we're going to come right back with more in just a minute. No extra charge for the foghorn, by the way. Just helping you folks out there. 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. All right.
I wish our cars could adjust. When the fog rolls in, then you get that little... That'd be great. I have one more clip I'd like to play before we switch gears. When we had Ryan Zinke on the show on Monday, he brought up this whole difficulty with talking about or using the word Islamic when we're talking about the Charlie Hebdo massacres or other instances around the globe. And anyway, I thought it was kind of interesting because I noticed in this interview, the French ambassador to the United States, Gerard Arad, I think is how you say it. And that's probably a horrible way
All
to say it in French, but
Nice try.
yeah, thanks. Just cancel out all the votes.
Just swallowed my tongue.
Just
I'm sorry.
anyway, this is the interview, and he basically just comes out and says it like it is. It sounds totally the opposite of the way it is when you listen to Josh Ernst try to say the same words.
And you probably wouldn't know this because it was on Fox. And if you're if you're a Dish subscriber, you probably never would have heard this. So now you get a chance to hear it here on Talkback. So away we go.
What I want to say is, as the French Prime Minister has said, we are at war, and we are at war with radical Islam. It means that right now that Islam, and in a sense the Muslims are the first victims, but Islam is breeding radicalism which is quite dangerous for everybody. So I think that in the coming weeks or the coming months we have to define a global strategy, and a part of the strategy is to work with the Muslim countries. They have to do their part of the job.
Are you surprised by the reluctance of the Obama administration to use the word radical Islam?
Everybody has its own sensitivity. Really, that's the political life in the U.S. It's not the same thing that the political life in France. The fact is, in France, is that, as we have known, an attack which was really an attack by Islamists, and it was not only an attack only by Islamists, but it was an attack on the Western democratic values. So that's led our government to define the war, to say now it's clear what we have. On one side, radical Islamists, on the other side, democracy.
Wow. So there you go. So what do you think? I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting. And I was thinking a lot about it the other day because, I was thinking, well, what would have the tables were turned? I happen to be Christian. I was thinking there are some examples of some pretty horrible groups out there. For example, the Lord's Resistance Army, Joseph Kony's group. They go around, torture little boys, force them to fight in wars with them, and mutilate people. I mean, it's a brutal thing. I hate to have my religion tacked on. I mean, he's considered a Christian extremist group. I could understand why people would have a lack of sympathy towards using that word Christian next to Joseph Kony, right?
Right.
And the same way, using the term Islamist, if I happen to be a devout Muslim, towards one of these terrorists that goes and shoots up a marketplace or shoots up a comic stand or a publication house. It's just, I don't know. It's just a difficult thing. But just to watch the French have pretty easy way to talk about it, I had to think, what in French culture or French history would make it easy for them to say that term in a way that it's not easy for our United States officials to say that, or at least the reigning administration. And what jumped to my mind was just thinking about the French Revolution and the kind of the secular nature of that revolution.
Yeah, not exactly great friends with religions of any kind. So.
Yeah, they kind of have a little bit of animus. Yeah. I think, like almost as a whole culture towards religion.
So basically, all religions and their foibles and difficulties are basically, open
up for
targets.
The mocking.
Yeah, open targets. So.
Well, and if you look at what Charlie Hebdo did, they declared open war on religion. And really, Europe has been trending in that direction for quite a long time. It's not just the French. If you look at the percentage of Europeans who go to church versus the percentage of Americans who go to church, it's radically different.
It's true. Yeah.
Churches have become basically museums or beautiful edifices that were built, hundreds of years ago. Let's take our friends from America, see the cathedral. We don't go there, but by golly, there it is. So
on a Tuesday,
yeah, I have been in many of these churches. You'll go in and find 2 or 3 congregants. Whenever I travel over there, one of my favorite places to go is inside the giant churches and see the interesting architecture
and the stained glass and all that.
Yeah, but not a whole lot of human element there often. So.
Yeah. So that's kind of it's understandable a bit when Charlie Hebdo did what they did, poking fun at the Prophet Muhammad, and of course they have basically doubled down with this new issue that came out yesterday, I believe it was. Ordinarily they published about 50 to 60,000 copies. Now it's up over 5 million that have gone all the way through Europe and even over here to America. And
well, that's the thing. I heard that they didn't sell or send many, except for unless you kind of went out of your way to try to ship them over here.
Okay.
Not much went to the American market, but they did sell out almost as soon as they went to the market stall, which was kind of shocking. I mean, if you were one of the terrorists, you got to feel a little bit of wind out of your sails of having the opposite impact that you wanted, right?
Well, the interviews that went on in Paris in the Muslim communities after the distribution of this new edition was, what are you guys thinking? I mean, wasn't it bad enough what happened last time, and now you're doubling and tripling down, and there was one comment that said it could end up in a quote civil war, end quote. So. Because there are, I believe, about 5 million Muslims in France. So that's a pretty healthy number.
Well, one of the other things that was really scary that happened in the last 24 hours is the head of Turkey, NATO nation, almost joined the European Union. The head of Turkey was basically saying that nations had kind of provoked the attacks by whether it be blasphemy. I'm paraphrasing here, but
sure, yeah.
I was listening to the remarks through a translator, obviously, but I just walked away just kind of feeling dirty. Like, oh man, it's a big disconnect between what each of these countries is seeing and feeling over this issue.
Well, let's get Bob on the line. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Hi. I just want to remind you that words have meaning. For example, when we say the prophet Muhammad, it makes it sound as though he's the prophet of the entire world's religions. Shouldn't we rather say the Islamic prophet Muhammad?
I think it's
good to me.
That's all I got.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate the call. All right, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. We're going to take one more quick call, and then we are going to take a commercial break, and then we'll come back and talk with Michael Moore about the plan to end homelessness, the 10-year plan. And so let's get Catherine on. Catherine, go ahead. You're on Talkback. Hi.
Okay, just a couple of points. I wanted to talk about the use of satire, which has a long and valued history in political discourse, and has always been an expression of free speech, especially politically, and especially in revolutionary times. And I kind of suspect we're in one of those eras again. The second thing I wanted to kind of say is that you can compare Islamic fundamentalists like the Al Qaeda and all that to bullies. I mean, the principle is the same. How far do you go to accommodate a bully's requirements to avoid getting yourself beaten up one way or the other? They find it disgusting that females are uncovered. They find it disgusting that people drink alcohol. And in certain areas in places in England and places in France, they impose those kinds of restrictions at the with the threat of retaliation if people engage in them. So what do you think?
I think it's up to those societies to fight back. I mean, if they find it objectionable, especially if these folks are in the minority, it's time to play a little bit of democracy majority rules here.
Well, in some of those areas, majority does rule.
Yeah. All right, Catherine, we got to run.
Thanks.
Thanks for the call. We're going to come right back. Michael Moore is joining us right here. We're going to come right back with more of Talk Back and shift gears in a moment. I know, I'm so childless, so childish sometimes. I love the sound of the foghorn. I think it's really cool. Anyway, 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Now, we are shifting gears, and it's good to have Michael Moore back with us once again, the 10-year plan to end homelessness. First of all, welcome back. Good to see you again, sir.
Thanks, Peter. It's good to be here.
All right. Now we're 1 year in now, is that right?
A little over 1 year, yeah.
Okay,
so we got started in about October of 13, so we just kind of wrapped up putting out a yearly report here, so from the October, we got the report out about mid part of November or so. And it, gave us a pretty good look at what actually happened in the first year and areas where we, anytime you file a report, you can look back and say, oh, here's some things that didn't go quite like we had hoped. Or in our case, I think most of the things we did were successful, but we found some areas that I don't think we had fully addressed in the plan that came as a little bit of a surprise. So we can talk about those as we move along.
Let's do the surprises. I'm curious. What jumped out as a surprise to you?
Well, I think the thing that jumped out first was that we studied a variety of different demographics of people who might be homeless or might become homeless when we were doing the research for the plan. And obviously we knew that, because adults are homeless, sometimes children are homeless. And we know that sometimes children are in bad situations at home and they wind up at Watson's or, the youth home, situations like that. What we didn't factor in, and what I still don't think we really know the full depth of, was that there are a group of teenagers who they haven't gotten in trouble with the youth court system. Their parents may or may not be doing a great job, but it's gotten to the point where the kid just can't stay home. So they're not a runaway per se, and they haven't bailed on school. They're still wanting to go to school and do a good job and, keep up with their studies and maybe move on to the next level at college. But they're finding it hard to live with their parents. And so that group of kids has started floating basement to basement, couch surfing.
Yeah, right.
But sometimes it gets worse than couch surfing, and sometimes they're in their cars. And sometimes, we've seen them looking for access at more traditional kinds of homeless services, which we really can't provide. I mean, if a 16-year-old kid shows up at the POV, he's not getting in. So people in the school district alerted us to this sort of issue about the middle of last year. I noted that I was starting to get a bunch of calls from family resource officers at the school. And then we got together with Cindy Kennedy, who's the McKinney-Vento program director in the Missoula County Public Schools. And so we just kind of got ourselves a small little task force and sat down and thought and just sort of puzzled over this problem. How many is it? What would we do with them? Some state laws don't make it that easy to help teenagers who are not emancipated, because if you start trying to help them and they're not of majority age, you could be, potentially committing custodial interference just by trying to offer them some sort of help. So in the past, there have been agencies that when they've seen this group arrive at their doorstep looking for some sort of assistance, they've been kind of like, we'd like to help, but we have some concerns about.
So basically you're a hot potato.
Yeah, I mean, you could be exposing yourself to some sort of litigation, and conceivably, and this is probably more in the theoretical realm, but, it could be a crime on your part to actually try to help somebody if you don't implicate their parents. And that's the last thing they want, is to have their parents implicated.
So just to get some things straight, first off, what was your estimate on the number of kids in this situation?
Well, I don't think we had any estimate at all when the plan first got published.
Right.
I think we thought that in a population, let's just pick the word, pick a number. We were guesstimating in the first year of the plan that the homeless population, and we use the phrase any given day, but I don't even know what that means. But we'd throw out the word 500. We do an annual homeless count in Missoula. Just the federal government requires that we do it across the country. It's done on one day. Everybody does it. Do you get everybody that day? Probably not. Could it be that that's more people than usual? Could it be that it's less people than usual? All of those things are possible. So when we talk about homeless numbers in Missoula, I don't think we have a number that anybody would say, oh yeah, that's exactly right. So we knew that 500 people, you got to figure that 20 to 25% of those people are going to be kids. Now, where we didn't succeed, I think, is deciding or determining what age group are those kids. I think we thought a lot of those, they're kids, they're in their parents' home. So this idea that there would be this group of teenagers that weren't at home, but that weren't also being cared for by the public system in some way, Child Protective Services, youth homes, youth court, some jurisdiction would be managing them. That's the part that came to a surprise.
They've got to be. So basically, what I hear you saying is there's a lot of compartments where these kids could fit, but there's some that are non-compartmentalized.
Yeah,
basically.
some are not fitting.
Right. Yeah.
And so the question is, how many are there? Well, so when we got together, we sat down with, Jason Weiner from the city council. We sat down with Jeff Birnbaum from the youth homes, and we started thinking, like, well, what could we do with these kids if we had them? And so last year, I think there were times when we were looking at any given day, again, 5 to 10 kids being out on the proverbial street. And at that point, we started thinking, well, maybe we will look for some sort of grant that would let us have some additional beds at the youth homes, and we would have a place for those kids to go should they come up. So we didn't move ahead on the grant because we wanted to look here at the first semester of the school year and see what happened. Well, lo and behold, this year we haven't had those same kind of calls. So, that makes us feel like we were more right in the first place when we didn't make a guesstimate on this population. So the fact is there are going to be some teenage kids that don't fit somewhere in the system, and we have to figure out what to do with them.
We're going to take a break, come right back. We have all three lines open, visiting with Michael Moore, the 10-year plan to end homelessness. 721-1290 is our number, or 1-800-568-5309. If you're not near a phone, you want to make your comments known on our Facebook page. We'll be happy to share those with Michael as well. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us on Talkback, 721-1290. We've got all three lines open. John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian. Michael Moore joining us from the 10-year plan to end homelessness. Kind of talking about the a niche, if you will, of kids that can't seem to get along with their parents for one reason or another, whatever it might be, and find themselves, quote, homeless, end quote, trying to figure out what to do with them. So go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you, this is a question from Catherine. She asks, what are the requirements of emancipation? You're saying it was difficult to help some of these kids because there might be legal fallback unless they were emancipated or of age, a majority age. So what do you have to go through in order to emancipate a child?
Well, the first thing and the easiest thing to do, obviously, is turn 18. There's a legal procedure that you can follow that allows you to be emancipated, but that's kind of about problem number 19 that's on this kid's list. So that's not an area that they're pursuing. And for us, it's not necessarily an area that we're pursuing either, because if we urge someone to get emancipated from their parents and their parents come back and say to us, you were trying to take my kid away, well, right now, I think you'd run afoul of the state's custodial interference statute. So that's something where we see, you see an outlet, but, if you go through it, there's some percentage chance that somebody's going to sock you in the face, like big time financially.
Well, let me ask you this. Before this project began, obviously this problem has been in existence for a long time, long before you came along and the United Way put the whole thing together. So this has been happening all the way up until now. How has it been dealt with up until now?
Not effectively. It's been dealt with the same way that it's kind of being dealt with last year, which is, you pay as close attention to the kid as you can. You make sure that they're eating square meals when they're at school. You're making sure that you're helping them as much as you can with their studies so that they can keep up with their work. And you're inquiring on a day-to-day basis. Are you safe where you're at? Are you, is your living situation tenable, at least for a short term? Is there some chance that you could get back with your parents? Is there some way that another family could take you in so you're not in your car? So it's kind of, baling wire and duct tape kind of situations. And mostly, I wouldn't say that's an effective way to do it, but it is a way that works over time because, a lot of these kids are in problem situations that time will kind of sort them out. But when the separation occurs, it's a pretty acute problem for them. And, teenagers are volatile beings. And, sometimes the problem comes off as being way worse than it might actually be. I think any of us who've had teenagers have had that happen on a daily, hourly, and perhaps minute by minute basis.
You realize the apocalypse happened when you couldn't watch the show that they were.
Has anyone guessed yet that I've had several teenagers? And let me just say on that front, they're all gone.
Yeah.
He holds his hands up into touchdown.
That's right.
Touchdown, Michael Moore.
Yeah,
At the very least, it's a 3-pointer. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely first down Montana. That's no doubt about that. Give us that.
So I wanted to open the phones up to our callers. I know that the people in Missoula encounter homelessness from time to time. Maybe it's when you're running down the by the river in the summer, or maybe it's when you're pulling out of the large Walmart uptown. That's when I seem to encounter most of the homeless that I encounter. And maybe it's when you're walking around at night downtown, if you ever happen to do that. That's when I also see a lot more homelessness. So give us a call, 721-1290. Tell us what you think of the situation here in Missoula and how we're dealing with it.
I tell you what, we'll take a little break. We'll wait for these calls to come in. We got one right now, and Michael Moore joining us. He'll be with us for a while, so we'd love to have your calls. Tell us your experience and how you're seeing how it's working out. We'll be right back with more of Talkback right after this. Talkback, rolling right along. This is our time in it, Michael. I feel like I don't have my elevated shoes on. But anyway.
I don't need to go that far back in time either, really.
We're back on Talkback. Now, before we get to Michael Moore joining us in studio, the traditional argument is, we start talking about homelessness, the argument always comes in, well, there are a lot of these folks that, by golly, they want to be homeless. You try to help them, and they don't want help. They're making money panhandling. I've heard stories, urban myths of people who make lots of money panhandling, and so they don't want your help. And so why do we have this big push to end homelessness when it seems so many want to be that way? So when you encounter that argument, what do you say?
Well, when I encounter that argument, and I would say to you, Peter, I'd say, well, you're 5 to 10% right, because that's the part of the population that wants to, if that's the right term, be homeless. I think it's easy to see a person panhandling, see a person maybe not interested in alcohol treatment, not interested in mental health treatment, not even really that interested in coming inside and say that person wants to be homeless. Well, from a distance, your car to the door of the ox, do you know if he's mentally ill or not? I guarantee you don't.
Yeah.
So that person, I'd say there's a 50 to 75% chance that the person that you've seen is mentally ill, has been mentally ill for a very long time, and may even have once been institutionalized in a mental institution.
And since they've been all shut down now, or so many have been shut down.
And so that person may be coping by using alcohol. They're not signed up for any sort of public service, so they're not being treated. Or maybe their mental illness has gotten them to the point where they just, they can't do it. They can't come in. Yeah. So here's the deal. More than half the people who are homeless in Missoula, the city of Missoula, have a job. More than half the people in Missoula who are homeless are part of a family. Anybody who has gone to a big box store and been checked out by a very nice cashier has probably encountered a homeless person and didn't say, oh, that person wants to be homeless. Oh, that person wants to panhandle, because those people are working their butts off just like the rest of us.
Okay, well,
yeah, real quick, this is a call from Levi. Levi says he was one of those kids, the vagabond kids that kind of don't have a place to go and didn't really fit into the system, and it was difficult to help because you might get sued. Anyway, he was wondering, what about a waiver that the parents could sign? Is there a process by which these organizations can go back to the parents?
That's actually, John, one of the things that we've been talking about. We've also talked about some, just a little tweaking here and there of state law, and maybe making it possible to get some sort of release from another family member, maybe an aunt or uncle or somebody that could say, yes, it's okay to deal with this kid without having to go directly to the parent.
We have 2 minutes before we have a hard break, so I want to give Michael, who's been very patiently waiting. Michael, go ahead.
Good morning, Peter and John. How are you?
Good, sir. What's on your mind?
Good. I don't know. My heart goes out to the homeless, and they always end up on my doorstep at my studio, and I've always helped them out. So one day, this guy had his sign out, and in your town there in Missoula, we'll work for food. So I picked him up and brought him to the job site, and there was a bunch of guys working, and he lasted about 2 days. I never seen anybody so slow, and finally I kept up with him, and I said, hey, do you want to work or not? And he goes, I make more money standing on the street corner with my will work for food than he does with me. And I was paying him, $10 an hour. That's what I usually start guys with. Paying him $10 an hour, and he's going, I make more money standing on the street corner with the sign, and apparently it's a racket. I mean, he's paying someone to have him out there on the street, and there's a racket going on with homelessness, and I kind of got a bad taste in my mouth ever since, but they still end up on my doorstep, and I keep helping them out, but at the same time, it's almost as if they don't want to work. And my heart goes out to all the homeless people that are out there, and I wish I could give more, but I'm not sure if they really want to give back to life and to humanity.
Sure. Hey, Michael, I hate to do this to you. We are almost completely out of time for this segment. We're going to process what you've told us and talk about it when we come back, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And by the way, thank you for what you've been doing. That's awesome. Good for you. So we're going to take a little break and come right back after the top of the hour. Michael Moore, he's chomping at the bit to talk about that. So 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Hey, we're coming right back after the top of the hour news. Okay, we're back on Talk Back. John King, I'm Peter Christian. Joining us in studio, Michael Moore. He's, of course, with the 10-year Plan to End Homelessness, former reporter and editor.
City editor.
City editor of the Missoula newspaper. I love that byline whenever I used to see it. So anyway, you have been telling us some really interesting things during the break about
we just left off last caller.
Yeah, with Michael.
Was
right.
Michael, and he was talking about his experience with an individual that came that he brought to his business or his art shop, I believe is where he works, and tried to get him working. Had paid him a $10 an hour wage, and then the guy said, or the gal, not really sure, the homeless individual said, I make more money with a sign out in front of wherever I was standing before, so I'd rather, just go ask for money. What is this a typical experience?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's a typical experience, but it definitely has the ring. It mostly has the ring of truth as a anecdote. I think that and I think Michael is doing what most of us would do, responding with a kind heart, seeing a need and feeling like I'm here, I'll try to fill it.
It starts with me, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really natural, and we don't want to tell people to not be helpful, but sometimes that kind of help isn't helpful. It's random, for one thing. And so what I would say about Michael's experience, and a lot of people have had this, I had it 10 years ago myself when I worked at the newspaper, is that you could be dealing with somebody who's a little more sophisticated than you might think. Will work for food might well be an advertisement that says, I don't really want to work for food, but would you give me $5? On the flip side, it might be literally true. I've hired homeless people in the past before I knew better than to just give money to random people to come up and do yard work, to move some trash around, to help me build a hot tub base or something like that. And, I got some pretty dang good labor. On the other hand, I got a couple of guys that sat on their butts. So it's quite possible that what happened to Michael could happen. And are people making more than $10 an hour panhandling? Some people are. Yeah. That's true. There is a group of people, and this is where the debate gets kind of fuzzy sometimes, because we says, if you say panhandler, somebody says homeless, like those two are equated. Well, the fact is, some of the best panhandlers in this town, they're not homeless. They have apartments. Panhandling is their job. They come out, they work 5 to 6 hours a day. Most of them that do this, sort of in a professional, and I'd use air quotes on professional, they come out around 10 or 11 at night. They stay out till about 3. The time when people come out of bars is the time when they hit people up the most. That person's judgment is a little bit down. That person doesn't want to encounter a potentially angry panhandler guy. That person is often a college student who hasn't been educated about whether I should give money to homeless people or not give money to them. And they hand them $5 or they hand them $2. And the guy goes home with, I've talked to a number of guys on the street that, $100 day is a reasonable day for him. Now, is that the broad experience of homeless people? No. That's a cagey guy playing the system. Now, I don't necessarily buy Michael's argument that there's a racket, that there's some sort of homeless mafioso out there where sending these homeless people out as sort of employees per se.
Oliver type thing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing,
please.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you got to remember is when you're talking to people who have been down and are out and have been out on the street for a long times, some of the tales are going to trend more toward apocrypha than the actual truth of things. In dealing with those people, you got to realize that you might be getting the most heartfelt, true story, and you might be getting played for all it's worth. So, in Missoula, we have urged people to not give directly to people who are panhandling on the street. One, it perpetuates panhandling on the street. I mean, if people are successful doing it, people are going to keep doing it. It isn't the most effective way to help people.
Real quick. I have the same feelings. I get sick when my friends come in from out of state and they give money to the people panhandling downtown. You're not helping anybody is the way I feel about it. But what should you do? I mean, can a police officer downtown arrest someone that's panhandling? Isn't it illegal?
Well, you have to quantify the difference between panhandling and aggressive panhandling, right?
Yeah,
right, and that's the difference, Peter. Your ability to panhandle is protected by your right to free speech.
Okay.
Now, what you can't do is, be an ass about it. If you get up in somebody's face, if you make them feel threatened, we've got an aggressive panhandling ordinance here that sets out some conditions under which you could be guilty of a crime. But if you just hold out a sign and say, we'll work for food, or give me $2, or could you buy me a turkey sandwich, you haven't done anything illegal. I think the city went through the sort of hand-wringing, gnashing of teeth effort in the middle of last year with, trying to create all these situations where people can't be downtown, and it ran afoul of our basic freedoms as Americans.
The ACLU got involved, right?
The ACLU got involved, and I think we were in a situation as a city where we fully expected to be sued.
All right. We're going to go to a break here in a second, but there's two things I really want to talk to you about. One, what are the successful programs, especially when it comes to housing, that have been working over the past year? And second, you have a kind of controversial thing that I know you're pushing this year, which is housing for people that want to stay on their stimulants, whether it's alcohol or drugs. And the idea, I guess, is to have these houses or these places where they can stay while they're self-medicating. So I want to go into that with you after the break.
Yeah, let's do that. And then if you would also remind me, I want to talk briefly about the 3rd Street trailer court experience that we had this year, because that really kind of pointed out some areas where, as a community, we need to be thinking ahead.
Okay, we're going to come right back, and we have all 3 lines open. This is Missoula. This is our town, and this is our situation to try to help deal with. And we got somebody here that's actually doing it on a professional level. We're going to come right back, at least for the next 10 years, or 9.5 years. We'll be right back. John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian. Joining us in studio, Michael Moore. And, okay, John, you just brought a whole bunch of stuff here for our guest.
So one of the things that I know we're going to get into eventually, we'll probably line up the lines with it, is this idea, this concept of housing. I guess it'd be temporary housing for people that are self-medicating with either alcohol or drugs, or maybe they're just recreationally using these substances, but it's part of their homelessness issue. So I want to talk about that. But before we get into it, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one of the things that you had mentioned to me as being the most successful elements of the 10-year plan so far was this idea of helping people into housing, more permanent housing, by giving them first month's, last month's rent sort of thing. So if you could kind of talk about the big successes so far.
You bet. So in the past, and across the country, we have we viewed homelessness as sort of this sort of graduated level, kind of like elementary school and junior high and senior high, or middle school and senior high. So we would put people in emergency shelter, we'd put them in transitional housing, maybe help them out for a year or two, and then we would move them on to permanent housing. The federal government wants us to move people to permanent housing more quickly, sort of take the transition part out of that, get them into housing, provide them some services for some period of time, and then set them free. Nationally, cities that have done this with 10-year plans, they're having a really high success rate, a better rate than we had as a country with transitional housing.
So what's the rationale?
The rationale there seems to be there's one pretty good study of the demographic, and one of the central findings is that in programs where people are getting sort of 6 months of assistance, they're also being required to spend some of their own money. So we're asking, pay a little bit more in the 4th month, pay a little bit more in the 5th month, pay a little bit more in the 6th month. Well, that's an investment for those people. And they've said quite frankly that I spent my own money.
So it's more of a teach a person how to fish sort of situation.
It is more of a teach a person how to fish thing, and it's kind of a bootstrap argument. And I think it's hard to go out and find a lot of evidence that bootstrapping is a great protocol for moving ahead. This is one where it works, and it definitely works. So
now is this also the same thing you were mentioning earlier off air, where you said, usually when the federal government comes in and tells you to do something, it's not that great of a deal, but this is one example where the federal government told us we had to do something and it worked out.
Well, this is something where they've told us to do something that actually has evidence as an awesome idea. So we're happy to do it.
That's one.
Check one.
I don't know that we could get if we had everybody start calling in, that we would get a very long list of places where that's the exact, where this really seems to be the right answer. But this does seem to be the right answer. It would be even double awesome if they would attach additional funding to that, which is not really the case. But, they've asked us to do something. We're doing it. This year, it has been super successful.
Go ahead. I was going to say, you had mentioned during the break that they actually had you close down the Joseph residence, which was housing people temporarily, and those funds for this particular project. Is that right?
Well, so here's the deal. They didn't tell us you have to close down the Joseph residence, but they suggested that you ought not be in the business that the Joseph residence represents. And so in what I think is one of the best examples of Missoula kind of coming together, and instead of fighting over minuscule resources, saying, let's pool them, Aaron Fowler at the POV said, we'll shut down the Joe, we'll give the money that we get to run the Joe to the YWCA, which is going to run a rapid rehousing program, which is what we're talking about here, helping people with first and last month's rent, security deposits, some assistance over 6 months.
And then you're on your own.
We'll give the Y that money. And so that's what they did. So this year the Y was working with about $150,000, maybe a little bit more, to put families into housing. WORD, Women's Opportunity Resource Development, had a similar program with a smaller amount of money, and the Human Resource Council had some money and a similar program. They're all a little bit different, but the basics are the same. So
how much money are we spending altogether?
About $300,000 for rental assistance. And that money is going to house in the neighborhood of 200 people.
Wow.
That's probably a low number. So if you said, sorry, Peter, you have to keep your mouth shut here for just a second. Because
yes.
If we have,
he's going to jump over there and push that button on you.
No, but look, here's the deal. Let's say we counted 600 homeless people this year. We housed 200 of them in one program. That is about twice the national average for success.
So
in the first year.
Yeah, I guess my question is, where does the Missoula Housing Commission fit into all of this?
You mean the Missoula Housing Authority?
Yeah, Housing Authority, sorry.
Well, you know, they house some homeless people, and then they house a lot of people who are low income.
Okay.
Their problem is availability. You know, the Housing Authority, they have a long waiting line to get into their housing. And so one of the things that we know as a community is that we need more housing that's more affordable. Right now we are experiencing a little bit of a higher vacancy rate than we've had in the past. You know, there's been a lot of apartment building. All you got to do is like drive down Russell Street, drive down Reserve, or out Mullen Road and say, whoa, man, there's a crap ton of apartments out there. And there are. What that's done has freed up some housing that's sort of more in the interior part of the city, the outskirts of downtown, even the university, west side neighborhoods. You know, places that were renting for $750 5 years ago, 10 years ago, are renting for $550. So that makes them a lot more available to the people that come to us.
Okay, we're up against a break. And so, Emmett, if you'll hang on just a second, we'll be right back. We have two lines open. Michael Moore joining us. This is really interesting. And I don't know about you, but I'm learning a lot. And this is good, which is a novel experience for me. So we're going to come right back with more of Talkback in a moment. This is Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Thanks for joining us. John King over there. I'm Peter Christian. Michael Moore in studio. And I've been waiting, poor Emmett, making him wait all the way through the break. So, Emmett, you go ahead. You're on with
thanks
Michael.
for taking my call. Yeah, I was at the seminar to end, 10-year plan to end homelessness, one of those last year. I wasn't able to go to the others because I was ill, but actually, from what I've heard on that presentation, I do like the idea of wet housing, and that's where you're probably going to have the lines lit up against it. But it seemed to be the wet housing idea, if I'm not mistaken, people who are addicted or, drug addicted or addicted to alcohol could move into this wet housing. There'd be a nurse on stand or on call or a doctor living at the site. It would be monitored, and they would be asked a couple of questions each day. One, would you like to stop drinking today? Two, do you want to live for another day? I can't remember the whole thing, but it doesn't sound like it's enabling alcoholism or encouraging drunkenness, because the street alcoholics are going to be on the street anyway, whether we have wet housing or not, or in apartments. But at least they'll be medically monitored and encouraged to stop drinking. If they have mental health issues, maybe we can intervene for those. So really, wet housing to me is not enabling alcoholism. It's trying to help them and get them into treatment, or at least get them monitored. I think it's a great idea. So,
Emmett, come down here and let me put a gold star on your forehead.
A gold star on his forehead. That's not the sign of the beast, is it? A gold star?
It is not.
No.
Emmett, I think, is very concerned about this.
That's somebody who paid maybe closer attention to me than anybody else ever has.
Whoa.
Well, hey, thanks for your call, Emmett.
Thanks, Emmett.
You've made Michael's day. So did he get most of what he said right? Is that are you actually going to pay for a nurse or a doctor to be present?
Because he actually did the touchdown dance there.
Did he?
So, yeah.
Well, so what we're talking about, and Emmett used the word wet housing. We don't use the word wet housing. It's kind of a pejorative, but it's also it's kind of become part of the lexicon. What the way people refer to it in the social service world as harm reduction housing. And the idea is to take some of the people who are hardcore, but who would like to come inside. So this idea that every homeless person just wants to be on the street, being a panhandler, is, it's true in a limited number of cases, but there's a lot of people that would love to come in. But the conditions of them coming in, being sober, getting mental health treatment, like you have to do that, or following some religion in some cases at church shelters, that's beyond their capacity. So the idea behind harm reduction housing is that you bring people in sort of no conditions. There's rules.
Come as you are.
There's rules. You can't fight, and maybe you can drink here, but you can't drink there in the building. But the fact is, you bring them inside. And here's why you do it. A, the people who come inside, evidence shows about a year later, are drinking about half as much as they were on the street.
Wow.
Then the other side, and the reason that communities are getting behind this, is that if you go to the hospital that is closest to the shelter, if you go to the police station, the fire station, the ambulance service, and even the social service providers that are in that area where the place has been built, you're going to see considerably less use. So in Seattle, the first year that they had wet housing in their facility that's called 1811 Eastlake, 40% decline in emergency room admissions. 40% decline.
From this population?
From this population.
Okay.
So that tells you, A, who's going to the emergency room a lot of times is homeless people who have passed out asleep on the streets, alcohol. So, in this community, if somebody is drunk and lays down on the sidewalk, what are we going to do with them? If the police get called, they're duty bound. They have to take them somewhere. They can't just say, oh, he looks all right, I'm leaving him here. So they either take him to the jail, which is not appropriate, because maybe he didn't do anything that's an offense.
It's not like Otis and Andy.
It's not. And nobody but you and I remembers that, Peter. But maybe there's some other guy down there somewhere that remembers it.
Just the guy that sells the cigars on the...
John.
Just think Mayberry. Right.
He invented elevators. No. Or we take him to the hospital. Right. So if we take him to the hospital, what happens? Ka-ching. $1,000 bill at the minimum. We got homeless people in this town that have gone to the hospital this year over 100 times.
Wow.
We got people with bills that are over $100,000, and the hospital's going to eat that bill. So if we had a place where they could go and not be in the hospital and not be in a jail cell and not have the fire department come out and not have Missoula Emergency Services come out to get them, that's a win for the community, and it's also a win for that person because they're going to be tended to a little bit more on a daily basis. So this would be a small facility that might house between 10 and 20 people. Ideally, it would have a day shelter that anybody could come into at any time, and that the police at 1 o'clock in the morning, if a guy's passed out, they bring him to the shelter. It would be staffed 24/7. We are working on a proposal now, and I think we're probably a year to 2 years out to actually having a place like this. We're going to have a complete and open and honest discussion with the community about where would we put a place like this, who's going to run it, who gets into it, how long do they stay, what do we do with them. But we know from across the country this is a win-win. And I fully expect to get the arguments that say you're enabling this person's alcoholism, you got to make them get sober. And I appreciate and respect the people that have that response. But nationally, it doesn't work.
Let's get a call in before we have to take a break. Brandy, you're on Talkback with Michael Moore. Hi.
Hey, gentlemen. I guess if I was patient enough, I didn't need to call. But, John, I know you were just trying to ruffle feathers. But the term self-medicating, I think, is a little off base for people that addiction is a disease. So it's not as simple as I want to get off the street and get sober, or I'm going to just stop drinking because I'm no longer homeless. So I think the idea of having a place where people can go and receive the treatment they deserve for their disease makes sense as a community to help these people. So Michael addressed most of it, but I just don't think self-medicating is quite what majority of these people are doing. It's a little more complicated than that, I think.
Okay. Thanks for the call.
Thanks, Brandy. A gold star for you as well.
Yeah, we're going to we have to take a break, but we have all three lines open now. If you'd like to call, Michael Moore going to stay with us very graciously till 10 o'clock this morning. If you have a comment, give us a call at 721-1290. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, and thanks for joining us here. Michael Moore is here with us from the 10-year plan to end homelessness. So go ahead, John.
And so I understand, it's harm reduction facilities?
Right. Harm reduction housing.
Harm reduction housing. I understand that you're still looking for where these housing centers would go, right?
Yeah, and it's not going to be centers. It's going to be one facility.
Okay.
The idea and communities that we've looked at, Duluth, Minnesota is a little bit bigger than us, maybe 15, 20,000 bigger. They have a facility that has about 70 rooms in it. We would need half of that or less. The downtown population that really needs to be in this sort of facility is probably 15 people. What Duluth has done is kind of did a two-part building where you move people into the, sort of the emergency part of it. You give them housing. If they prosper, if they do well, if they want to stay inside, they go to the other side of the building. It's a little nicer room, maybe got a kitchen, something like that. So the idea is not that this is a short-term transitional housing. This is if people want to come in and stay, we're going to have them stay. A lot of these people have incomes. A lot of these people have Social Security or Social Security disability. We will charge people that can pay rent, some level of rent. We'll have in-kind services. The POV will be providing some services. Partnership Health Center will be providing some services. There's a handful of agencies that'll be involved in some way. We would have full-time security. And as to where, John, it's really going to be up to Missoula to tell us where. Obviously we're going to throw out some locations as possibilities. It needs to be in an area where the population that we're looking to serve can get to it. So I've had a lot of people who are so helpful say, well, I think it would be awesome if it was in Spokane or San Diego or, close like Alberton.
Canada.
It's not gonna be in those places, And sometimes I get a little blowback, when I'm downtown talking about this and say, this is something that, we need as a community. And people say, well, as long as it's not here or as long as it's not there. And, and my answer to them is it's already here. If you're a downtown business and you don't want this population hanging outside your downtown business, but you also don't want them housed somewhere,
right.
Well, you're kind of in the rock and the hard place because they got to go somewhere. And what we know nationally is if you put people inside, they will do better and your town will do better.
Okay. So is this kind of like the model of a rescue mission without the religious aspect?
Well, rescue missions have tended to be a little bit more like the POV, with a lot of programmatic stuff, an idea of sort of moving you along a continuum with the idea of sort of making you get sober.
So you have a pre-established outcome then.
Yeah. Here, we will, if somebody gets better over the course of time and says, hey, I think I'd start to look for a job, or maybe I would like to have mental health treatment. We will have those kind of services available and we can get those people to those sorts of services, but it won't be a requirement.
Okay.
Because if you tell people you can't drink to get in, they're not coming in.
Okay, let's get Mike on the line. Mike, you're on Talkback. Hi.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
There is a loser in this scenario, and that's the taxpayer. I think jail is a structured, safe environment because you have professionals who deal with this, who have been dealing with this for decades. What's going to happen? Who's going to be on the hook when a couple of college kids come in to town for a game, claim to be homeless, just want some free housing, and a drug addict high on PCP kills them in this facility?
Well, Mike,
that could be the taxpayer.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. And this is probably my fault that we haven't explained this quite fully. This is not a daily drop-in shelter. This is places where people are going to go to live. It's not like the POV where you come in for 2 nights and then you go out. The day shelter part of the building will be that way, but that will be a supervised place where, you can just come in, get out of the weather. That part, you will not drink. We will have the same kind of rules that we'll have to come inside anywhere. The housing, however, will be places where people are allowed to continue drinking. But those places, you're going to sign up and you're going to be paying monthly rent, or you're going to, you're going to at least have a contract, and that's your room. It's not like, so Mike's example of 2 college kids coming in on PCP, people acting up on PCP, you're right, Mike. The jail's the appropriate place for them, and the jail has the staff to deal with that. What the jail doesn't have the staff for is they're not a medical facility to bring people to them that are detoxing on alcohol and to just bring them drunk people. That's not appropriate. That's not the mission of a jail.
Well, I'll tell you, in my conversations I've had with the folks who are actually at the jail.
Oh, yeah.
And they say, if you only knew, if the people of Missoula only knew the percentage of people that come into that jail who really do have authentic mental problems, mental illness and difficulties, it would probably be astounding. And so here are these jail folks who are law enforcement officers. Their job is to enforce the law. Well, you get somebody with mental illness, and there's all sorts of there's amazing difficulties that go into trying to run that facility with hundreds of people in there, a large percentage of which need mental health.
And it's over half the population.
Yeah, so.
I have another question myself, but I'm going to read our Facebook post here from Brian because it's been sitting here for a little bit. He says, Michael's first public statement after being appointed was that we will not end homelessness in 10 years. This is from the Missoulian, quote, I don't think anybody involved thinks we'll end homelessness, that number will go down to 0, said Michael Moore, who was named the head of Missoula's 10-year plan to end homelessness efforts on Monday. Quote, we can't do that any more than we can end income inequality or joblessness. And there are some people who will elect to live on the street in some way. You have to acknowledge that that's real, end quote.
Amen.
So do you disagree with yourself at all?
Absolutely not. I would say exactly what I just said, except I might say it less eloquently. But no, that still holds true. Who said that?
Brian.
Brian, I'm sorry, but I was right then and I'm right now. Just because you have harm reduction housing, I don't have a magic wand. I can't make everybody go in it. Mm-hmm. So let's say there's 25 drunk guys downtown. Well, 15 to 20 of them, maybe they will come into harm reduction housing. Are there 5 to 10 people that are not going to? Yeah. And those people are not a homeless problem. That is a law enforcement problem. If that person wants to stay out, be on the street, be an aggressive panhandler, be drunk, passing out in the middle of town, that in the end is kind of my problem, but that's a community problem.
What about those that are using illegal substances like meth or PCP?
They won't be using illegal substances in this sort of housing.
Okay.
We're up against a break. Again, we have all 3 lines open. A few more minutes if you have a question about this, because every time you drive around Missoula, no matter where it is, South Side or downtown, whatever, you see folks who are homeless. And now here's an organization trying to do something about it, or at least quantify it. We'll be right back with more in a moment. Hey, we're back on Talkback. Thanks for joining us. 721-1290 is the number. Got a couple of folks who want to get on with Michael Moore right now. Let's get Norm on first. Norm, thank you for holding, sir. You're on with Michael Moore. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning, Norm.
I used to live in Orlando, and at a time there, they had an epidemic problem with homeless and all the stuff that was going on. People were getting robbed at the red lights. I even had somebody try and rob me once. What they did to get rid of this mess that they had going on is that they enacted a permit program for panhandlers. I think it was like $5, and it cleaned up the streets, literally cleaned it up. But they have another side to that program where they're trying to rehabilitate these people. Because if you don't have a permit and they arrest you, well, that's just what they want, because then they get 3 squares and a bed for the night. But they came up with a program down there, and they literally cleaned up the streets. And I'm not completely sure about all the facts, but I do know about the permit. It's a panhandler's permit thing. And if you were going to collect money or sell anything, you had to have a permit.
Now, let me ask you something, Norm. Let's say you got your permit and you collected $25 that day. Do you have to give a slice of it to the city?
No, apparently it was just some kind of way of trying to regulate the people that, because they were anywhere from
half a dozen to a dozen people in the intersections. People were getting hit.
Sure.
And robbed and all the stuff. This one guy they investigated who had a house and lived right by this major intersection, he was making close to $50,000 a year off collecting from people at the intersection in a can.
Interesting. All right. Thanks, Norm.
All right.
So, what do you think?
Well, I think what happened years ago is that a lot of towns tried to figure out ways to regulate panhandling. And what happens is, and I'm guessing what would have happened in Orlando, is that eventually a court somewhere said you can't do that. It's your right under freedom of speech, and as long as you're not being a douche, to ask people for money.
Is that legal jargon?
Yeah, that's a technical term.
or a jerk.
No, but you can't, the deal is you cannot abridge that unless somebody, it's the same thing like if people decided that we were bad people here at Talkback today, they can come out and yell at us on the sidewalk. As long as they're on public property,
as long as they don't try to sell something.
Yeah,
but that's the thing that makes it. I mean, that's why this rings so true to so many people. What Norm's saying is that anyone who's tried to sell something knows you got to get a permit. You got to go through all these hoops. But if you just want to go out and beg for money, it's easy breezy.
Right. And so the big difference and where communities get in trouble and where places like Orlando could have gotten in trouble is the difference between the sidewalk and me going to my car. If you get in there and you start abridging my liberty to get to my car, then you got a problem. If you just say, Mr. Moore, would you give me $5? I'm sorry, you're entitled by the Constitution to do that in this country.
So, Mr. Moore, will you give me $5?
I think
it's my constitutional right to ask for $5.
I think I have $5 here, John. So
Sweet Georgia Brown.
Look, I have 20.
Heck
Holy
yeah.
crap.
Mr. Moore, can I have $20?
I would actually like to give my money to an organization that will determine, John, whether you're an appropriate party to receive my assistance.
1, 2, 3, you're out.
I think I'm going to get turned down.
It turns out we've given you $20 20 times before, and you failed every time.
Let's get
you're
Pat.
Done.
All right, Patty, you're on the line with Michael Moore. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. No, I think the homeless shelter is great. We need it. Every town needs it. There are people that just have had, devastating things happen to them in their life. They're addicted to alcohol, they're addicted to whatever, and they can't pull themselves up out of this, and they're going to drink. And if you take them to jail, unless they're offending someone, like hitting them or pushing them, or like the guy said, breaking in his car trying to rob him, well, that's a criminal. That's a different story. It's about $1,000 every time you book someone in jail. So if the taxpayers want to pay $1,000 every time they book them in jail when they're not going to quit drinking, well, have at it, because I think that's just ridiculous. I'd rather give that $1,000 to the homeless shelter where they can monitor the people. And there are groups of people that go from town to town, and I think, this is my own opinion, that go from town to town, stay in a hotel, and they take each corner of the freeway. And they collect the money, and it's like a, what do you call it? Like a, like a group of people. I don't know what you would call it, but I'd rather spend the money at the homeless shelter.
A traveling troupe of panhandlers, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd rather spend the $1,000. It would go a lot further at the homeless shelter than one night in jail.
All right, and thanks for the.
Out and drink again.
Okay.
And that's it for today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
With that, we're up
she
against
has her own sign off.
Yeah,
that's it for today.
We're up against our last break. It's only a 1-minute break. We're going to come right back. Only 8 minutes, by the way, left. If you have a question for Michael Moore, now's time to get it in. All 3 lines are open. We'll be right back after this 1-minute timeout. Talk back. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We sure appreciate it. John King, Peter Christian, Michael Moore. Now, you had brought up something that happened on 3rd Street when they were doing all that renovation. There was an older trailer court that was there many, many years, as long as I can remember.
Yeah, me
too. And the folks who came in and bought it said, okay, you guys have to out you go, and that started something, right?
Yeah, so over on 3rd Street, and this is kind of at 3rd... It's just west of 3rd and Russell.
Yeah,
so right across the street from the Good Food
from
store,
the T&C Lounge.
And if you drive there now, you will see, you'll see a nice new AutoZone building, and then you'll see a vacant lot back behind it. And they may have started working on that. So it basically was 2 sites that were bought. And that place had been home to about 15 individuals and or families. Those people were paying in the neighborhood of $300 and a little less to rent their space. Most of them had lived there for a very long time. Most of them felt like this is where I live, this is where I'll die.
It's home.
And so, obviously it's not illegal for somebody to sell the property. And for somebody else to come in and do something with it. So that's what happened in this case. And so we got two different developments. One will be a housing development and one is an auto zone. What didn't happen and what we didn't have any sort of way to have a backstop for this was, well, what do we do with those people? So over the years that those people have been there, we have outlawed as a city trailers on wheels. So you can't relocate a trailer that's on wheels in the city limit.
And many of those were so old they couldn't have been moved anyway.
A lot of them were old, and a lot of parks in Missoula, mobile home parks, now will not let you bring in a mobile home that's older than, say, 1980. Because I called almost all of them, and I found out what the regulations were. So immediately we had created a class of people that is used to paying $285 to $300 a month. Find a place that you can pay that in this town and live.
It's not happening.
It's zero buckshot. Not going to happen. Or find some sort of money that would help these people get to some other place. Well, there's no program that fixes people that have just been uprooted by a legal property.
And these are functionally the working poor, right?
Yeah, these are good people. Some of the people worked, and some of them, I'd say at least half of them, are on some sort of a disability or were old. The last man that moved out of that place was a gentleman named Harry Matt. He lived there for decades and decades, and he gets less than $1,000 a month as a Social Security payment, and that's how he lives. So because we don't have any place for those to go, when this happened, I started getting calls, and they're like, hey, we hear you can help people with housing. And so, this was kind of outside the bounds of areas where we had tried to help people before. So we kind of barged off into some uncharted territory. And, we wound up asking some favors of some landlords. I wound up driving around in my car out in West Riverside looking for any place that a mobile home could be, at a place that a mobile home park that had a name, at places that didn't have names. We got all of those people moved. Now, some of them did it on their own. Some of them found their own housing. And I'd say I helped about half of them find housing. And, we had people very graciously help them move, get them hauled away. People, they gave us some really thoughtful in-kind gifts to help people come around. And it really, it made you feel good to be a Missoulian. For me to I emailed a group of about 40 people who help me pretty regularly and say, I need $300 to get this guy here. I need $400 to pay the moving company. And I always, within an hour, I had that money.
Wow.
But the larger lesson to that is that this is going to happen again. And it may not be a trailer court. It could be a block of older houses that are renting for not very much money. So I think we had a great learning experience here, and I think we'll be more ready for it next time.
We have about 2 minutes.
Sure.
So I want to give you the opportunity to let folks know how to contact you, what to do in case we have questions and we want to access what you're doing.
Yeah, so the Reaching Home, Missoula's 10-year plan to end homelessness, is housed at the United Way of Missoula County, but it is a joint venture with both the city and the county of Missoula. But I do work at the United Way. I'm always reachable there at 549-6104. And I am at email at michael@MissoulaUnitedWay.org. I always tell people, if you got a question about, do you qualify for this? Do you qualify for that? Always feel free to call me. I can always point you to the right resource. I am not really a service provider, although I have become.
Well, you could be an ombudsman, pretty much.
Yeah, but I've actually done quite a bit of service providing through the office this year. I mean, it's not the best model, but we do have a great group of programs here in Missoula, and for most people, there's a way for us to help you.
All right. And give us that phone number one more time.
549-6104.
Right. Now, one more question. We got less than a minute. So in 10 years, as you cast forward, how far do you think we'll get?
Peter, that's a good question. The question, I think it was Brian who quoted back my quote from last year. I still agree with myself. We're not going to end homelessness. There's always going to be somebody becoming homeless or somebody that we can't get in. This is going to be a long, hard fight. I think the fact that we housed in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% of homeless people in the first year is a good sign. But there may be years when we don't house that same percentage.
Thanks for being with us.
You bet. I really appreciate you guys having us on.
It's our pleasure. Now, what's coming up tomorrow, John?
3 Bobs: Bob Stitt, Bob Rowe, and Bob Hermes.
All right. So at 3 different topics, and one is a football coach, and we're going to find out if Bob Stitt, our new head football coach, has the Grizzly fight song down yet. So if he doesn't, we will have a tutorial. And again, I want to say thanks to Michael for being with us this morning, and all of our listeners and all your calls. You guys are great. Your questions are awesome, and we will continue. By the way, you can, if you missed this and you want to hear it again, it'll be on our website in a YouTube video a little bit later on tonight. So that's going to do it for Talk Back. We'll see you tomorrow.